described as the center of the trade route. In pages 223-224 of Dan Gibson's book, Quranic Geography, Dan Gibson wrote, Muslims and some Western scholars have imagined that the caravans carried incense, spices, and other exotic goods. But according to research by Kester and Springer, the age of frankincense was over and the Arabs now engaged in a trade of leather and clothing, hardly items which could have founded a commercial empire of international dimensions. End of quote from Dan Gibson's book. Dan Gibson and others claimed that the Mecca where Islam began was supposed to have been the center of a commercial empire of international dimensions. Then they demonstrated that Mecca al-Hijaz was not at the center of an international trade route. So they concluded that the birthplace of Islam must have been in another place that meets this condition. Petra was known, although at many centuries before, to be at the center of an international trading empire. As Petra fulfilled the condition they put, they concluded that Petra was the true birthplace of Islam. You may have noticed that Petra is not named Mecca or Becca, but this small detail should not be a problem for them. The word Becca in Arabic and Hebrew languages, Dan Gibson said, comes from Becca, which means cried or wept. Petra suffered from a devastating earthquake during the 4th century AD. Many died, and whoever survived must have wept and cried a lot. So they called the city Becca. Although there is no historical evidence to indicate that Petra was called Becca during the 7th century or during any other time, that linguistic inductive reasoning was more than sufficient for them to conclude that Petra was called Becca at the dawn of Islam. However, such reasoning will fail when you look in the Arabic language dictionaries, because you will find that the root Bek means overcrowding, which is more likely the description of people performing tawaf around the Kaaba. They said that the Mecca of Islam was supposed to be a commercial empire of international dimensions. Mecca al-Hijaz was not. Petra was, although many centuries before. Therefore, they concluded that Petra was the true birthplace of Islam. Its name was Becca because people there cried and wept a lot. Now, we have here an assumption or premise leading to a conclusion based on this premise. The assumption that Mecca was supposed to be a center of a commercial empire of international dimensions. I will show here that the assumption Dan Gibson and before him the revisionist school put, such assumption is utterly wrong. In other words, Mecca, the birthplace of Islam, was not and should not have been a center of commercial empire of international dimensions. Let us look at what we know about Mecca trading activities during 6th and 7th centuries AD. Arabian sources tell us that on the 5th century AD, Quraysh trade was confined to Mecca and with those around it from the Arabs. There was also annual market which took place in Uqaz in the month before the annual Hajj. Then Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, the great-grandfather of the Prophet, peace be upon him, went to Caesar and contracted with him to allow the merchants of Quraysh to trade with the Levant. Caesar gave him a pass letter stating such permission, thus ensuring freedom for Quraysh to trade in safety and peace. Towards the end of the 5th century AD, Hashim bin Abd Manaf initiated the two trade caravan journeys of Quraysh from Mecca, the winter caravan journey to Yemen and the summer caravan journey to the Levant. As Quraysh were respected among the Arabs because of their service to the pilgrims and to Al-Kaaba, they felt no fear for their caravans being robbed or harmed along the way. The tribes, through their lands the caravans travelled, did not charge them the usual heavy transit taxes they demanded from other caravans. This is what we know about the trading activities of the Meccan, which started only a little more than a century before the dawn of Islam. Such caravan trading journeys were still taking place during the early years of Islam. Now, let us see what the Holy Quran tells us about the trading activities of the Meccan, namely Quraysh, during the early 7th century AD. Quran Surah Quraysh tells us, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, for the covenants of security and safeguard enjoyed by the Quraysh, their covenants covering the winter and summer journey. So let them worship the Lord of this house, who has fed them from hunger and saved them from fear. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. This surah described the Meccan caravan trading activities. Two journeys, one in winter to Yemen and one in summer to the Levant. Only two journeys in the whole year. Does this trading activities look like a commercial empire of international dimensions? Mere two journeys, just sufficient to feed the Meccan and save them from hunger? Surely not. Dan Gibson and others claimed that Mecca was the center of an international trade route. After making this claim, they went ahead saying the Mecca in Hijaz does not qualify to hold such status. Therefore, it could not be the Mecca of the birth of Islam, but Petra, which according to them fits such trade description. Therefore, Petra must have been the true birthplace of Islam. Surah Quraysh showed that their assumption was totally wrong, and accordingly the conclusion they reached is also wrong. The birthplace of Islam is not a center of a commercial empire of international dimensions. That's why Mecca, with its mere 2 caravan journeys per year, is the one that fits the Quran description. Are we finished with this claim? No. Let us turn the table. We have a description in the Quran, Surah Quraysh, about the trading activities of the birthplace of Islam. Will such description fit Petra? Does Petra fit the winter and summer 2 journeys as described in the Quran? Obviously no. Petra will fail such condition miserably. First, because Petra already on the edge of the Levant. There will not be a winter journey. It's already there. And second, because throughout the period of the Nabatean kingdom, Petra indeed was the center of a commercial empire of international dimensions. Let us see what historians said about the Petra trading empire. To the people who deny that there were ever caravans or inland incense route parallel to the Red Sea deep in the desert, they better read the following Metropolitan Museum article. And I quote, "Frankincense and myrrh, highly prized in antiquity as fragrances, could only be obtained from trees growing in southern Arabia, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Arab merchants brought these goods to Roman markets by means of camel caravans along the Ensis route. The Ensis route originally commenced at Shabwa in Hadramaut, the easternmost kingdom of South Arabia. and ended at Gaza, a port north of the Sinai Peninsula on the Mediterranean Sea. Both the camel caravan routes across the deserts of Arabia and the ports along the coast of South Arabia were part of a vast trade network covering most of the world, then known to Greco-Roman geographers as Arabia Felix. South Arabian merchants utilized the Ensis route to transport not only frankincense and myrrh, but also spices, gold, ivory, pearls, precious stones, and textiles, all of which arrived at a local port from Africa, India, and the Far East. The geographer Strabo compared the immense traffic along the desert routes to that of an army. The Ensis route ran along the western edge of Arabia's central desert about 100 miles inland from the Red Sea coast. Pliny the Elder stated that the journey consisted of 65 stages, divided by halts for the camels. Both the Nabateans and the South Arabians grew tremendously wealthy through the transport of goods destined for lands beyond the Arabian Peninsula. End of article. The Metropolitan Museum article said, the geographer Strabo compared the immense traffic along the desert routes to that of an army. And the article said, both the Nabateans and the South Arabians grew tremendously wealthy through the transport of goods destined for lands beyond the Arabian Peninsula. End. If this was the international trade center in Petra, the capital of the Nabateans, controlling and owning an immense traffic along the desert routes, transporting world volumes to distant empires, source of tremendous wealth. If that was Petra, as Dan Gibson say, then this Petra do not fit the Quran description of the Meccan trade, which was a mere 2 journeys each year, just enough to feed the people of Mecca. It is clear Mecca al-Hijaz fits the Holy Quran description of the 2 trade journeys. Petra does not fit this description. Accordingly, the birthplace of Islam was in Mecca al-Hijaz, not Petra. We come here to the end of this episode. We'll meet inshallah in the next episode, which titled Mecca described as mother of all cities. However, there is no archaeological antiquities that goes back to the 7th century or before. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.